So let's begin by walking through the MVC request pipeline at a high level. This discussion will act as a kind of roadmap for the upcoming modules. Now, if there's any terms or concepts you're unfamiliar with during this discussion, don't worry. We'll be looking at each of them in detail later on. Now, the entry point for every MVC application begins with routing. After the ASP.NET Platform has received a request, it figures out how it should be handled through the URL routing module. Modules are .NET components that can hook into the application lifecycle and add functionality. We'll look at this more later. The routing module is responsible for matching the incoming URL to routes that we defined in our application. All routes have an associated route handler with them, and this is really the entry point into the MVC framework. If the request is matched to a route defined in our MVC application, the MVC route handler executes and retrieves an instance of the MVC HTTP handler. If this sounds a bit confusing, for now, just remember that the MVC route handler and the MVC handler are two different classes. Together they act as a gateway into the MVC framework. The MVC handler begins the process of initializing and executing a controller. The MVC framework handles converting our route data into a concrete controller that can handle requests. This is accomplished through components like the controller factory and activators, which are responsible for creating an instance of the controller class. This is also the stage in which features like dependency injection are implemented. After the controller has been created, the next major step is action execution. A component called the action invoker finds and selects an appropriate action method to invoke on our controller. Before the method is called, model binding takes place, which maps data from our HTTP request to parameters on our action methods. Action filters are also called before and after the method produces an action result. There's a lot going on in this stage, so we'll be sure to look at this one in depth later in the course. Now, after our action result has been prepared, the next stage triggers, which is result execution. MVC separates declaring the result from executing the result. If the result is a view type, the view engine will be called, and it's responsible for finding and rendering our view. If the result is not a view, the action result will execute on its own. This result execution is what generates an actual response to that original HTTP request. This might seem like a lot to take in all at once, and it is, but we're going to be devoting an entire module to each of these sections. This simplified version of what we discussed will just provide a good outline for us moving forward.